Alright, welcome back to Tanya Summary Shiur. It is week 43 Kananaha, and we're finishing off chapter 19 of part 4, which is Igeras HaKodesh. So we're finishing off chapter 19. Really, basically the entire chapter 19. We're probably going to recap the question at the beginning too that we did last week. And we're starting chapter 20, which is long and deep and Kabbalistic. So hopefully we'll try to summary our way through some of these things. I kind of wrestled this week more than with other weeks about how much of the Kabbalah to include, how much to explain, because it is really easy to get lost in the Kabbalah. As a matter of fact, this week I myself did get lost in one of these tiny ideas to be made, whatever. The point is that there's a lot of Kabbalah, there's a lot of juicy Kabbalah in the Tanya, but it's also, this is a summary share, and I want the ideas to just be given across in a summary without getting lost in the Kabbalah, so you could see the forest that is made up of the trees. So, to that end, I think I'm going to try to go with an approach of just explaining the core of what's being expressed. In chapter 20, that's going to necessitate some more explanation of Kabbalah, but ultimately we'll just see how it goes. That's just my thought process behind if I'm cutting out any of the Kabbalah that people like. I'm sorry about that, but ultimately I'm just trying to get the ideas across clearly. So without any further ado, let's start. So, chapter 19, last week, at the end of last week, we asked a question, which is essentially, Moshe Rabbeinu is said to be the greatest prophet of all times. Now, the Arizal describes Moshe Rabbeinu as having prophetic vision that reached until the lower part, the lower third, the lower half, however you want to view it, but the lower part of Atzilus, which is the highest of the four spiritual worlds that you would say exist in a way that we can appreciate. This is going to be something we're going to be discussing also in chapter 20 a little bit. It's almost impossible to discuss chapter 20 without discussing a little bit about Atzilus and what's below it. But ultimately, the question that we asked is that Arizal describes many levels higher than that which Moshe Rabbeinu perceived. For example, what's immediately above that lower third of Atzilus. So, seeing as that's the case, that Arizal knew more than Moshe Rabbeinu, how does this make sense? We thought Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest prophet. So, in a nutshell, in a very big nutshell, what the Alter Rebbe answers is he explains how the lower third of Atzilus is, in a sense, the practical vision of what this world should be vis-a-vis Hashem. In a very big nutshell, Atzilus is the most practical stage of Hashem's vision of what this world is supposed to be, and that lower third it's the lowest third, it's the most practical. It's the barest of practicalities. The Alter gives a mashal. I'll give the mashal in a second, but essentially, just my own mashal is when you look at a person, there's a lot in between you and the person, a lot of air, probably, maybe some glass, whatever it is, but ultimately, you get to see the face of the person that you're looking at, and that is ultimately your appreciation of them. When you look at them, you see, this is what I'm looking at. Now, really, there's more to the person than that. There's so many internal mechanisms in their face alone. Their bodies are so complex, and they have personalities, and their personalities are so deep, you can't just read that on a person's face. But ultimately, that is the final perception that a person has. When you look at a person, you see their face, and that's what you see. So, in a sense, this is what Hashem sees of the world. This is what we say the lowest third of Atzilus is. Moshe Rabbeinu had a perception of that, which is to say that he had a full perception of the world, almost in a sense the way that Hashem himself saw it. Not in a sense that Hashem doesn't see what's going on in the world, but just to keep on running with the example, even though it might not ultimately line up in all the details, but the same way that a doctor might know all the mechanisms that are going on behind the facial expressions, but ultimately what you're seeing, what you're perceiving in a direct way is just the person's face and their facial expressions. So in a similar way, Hashem, he might know everything that's going on in the world. He created it, and he knows it in a much more intrinsic way than just pure sight. He created it from scratch. He created it not only from scratch, he created it from absolute nothingness. So he knows it in such a deeper way. But as far as the one particular view, perception goes, that's how Hashem saw the world. And Moshe Rabbeinu, being the greatest prophet of all time, was able to perceive the world with that same godly perception of the world, which is really a fascinating thing. I mean, we say that when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke, was like Hashem speaking through his throat. It's really a crazy thing to imagine a human being with that capability, but that's what Moshe Rabbeinu was. The Arizal, he knew about higher realms. He knew about it intellectually. He knew about it because traditions he received from his teachers, or even if you want to say prophetic visions where he was told things, whatever the means were, that he knew these things. But ultimately, it wasn't a perception. Moshe Rabbeinu, he had a perception that was almost in a sense analogous to Hashem's. And not to say that it was Hashem's perception. Hashem knows everything in such an intrinsic way that we can't possibly even imagine. We can't begin to describe. But ultimately, what makes Moshe Rabbeinu so special is that he perceived it. It was real to him. It was tangible to him. The Arizal, he knew about it intellectually, but he didn't perceive it. So that's really the answer of the question in a nutshell. There's a lot of good things. I suggest checking it out, but if I don't want to mix in too many things to not detract from the main point, that is the flow of what was said. It's a very interesting point. It's important enough that the Alter Rebbe wrote a letter about it. And that concludes chapter 19. Chapter 20 is Kabbalistic, and there's no real way around that, but hopefully I will try to keep to the general flow of it instead of getting into all of the details, which are very geschmack. But regardless, so the Alter Rebbe quotes a line from Zohar. It's actually not a direct line from Zohar. It's almost identical in the Zohar. It's in Tikkun Zohar, Daf Gimel Amud Beis, if anyone's interested in checking it off. Over there, the line is, Ihu v'garmei chad v'hin, Ihu v'chayavi chad v'hin, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. So, but anyhow, the point is, what it means is that he and his vitality are one in it, and he and his causations are one in it. There's probably other ways of translating those words. Ultimately, the translation does not really matter, because it's clear in the Zohar what it's referring to. If you could say that Atzilus is a clear concept, it says clearly in the Zohar it's referring to Atzilus, and it's saying that the light of Hashem and the vessels which contain the light of Hashem, which exist in Atzilus, are all unified with the light of Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe says, this sounds like an interesting line. What does it mean? So the Alter Rebbe starts by explaining that there's two different ways you could say that you create something. You could either cause an effect, or you could something from nothing. I don't know about you, but whatever. Hashem can cause an effect, or he can something from nothing. Now, I mean, we could also cause an effect. It's mainly the something from nothing that I personally struggle with. But anyhow, cause and effect. When you have one moment of time that flows into the next, that is cause and effect. In general, and there's more to be said, but in general. The reason why is because one moment is directly influenced by the moment immediately prior. And essentially, what you do is you create a whole new universe, a whole new static universe, when one moment of time flows into the next. But ultimately, this new moment is not exactly new. It's from the old. It was caused, it's the effect from the moment immediately preceding it. It's called ilav alul, cause and effect. So that's different from creating something from nothing. Something from nothing is that you had nothing, and then you create a something. So the Alter Rebbe says, essentially, that cause and effect can happen in a lot of different levels, but only Hashem is able to make something from nothing. And the Alter Rebbe says, essentially, that the choke point at which that happens is at the lowest level of Atzilus, the lowest sphere of Atzilus, Malchus of Atzilus, that filters into Bria. And the word Bria, the word of creation, in Hebrew, literally refers to something from nothing. Yesh me'ayin is termed as Bria. Creating something from nothing is called creation. That is what the essence of creation is. You could form things, that's cause and effect. You can make things, whatever, but creation, the word creation in Hebrew, or in Lashon HaKodesh, I should say, the Holy Tongue, is reserved for creating something from nothing. Now, there's an important point to be made about creating something from nothing, which is that Hashem always exists. Hashem is the constant in the universe. There's no ever getting around that, possibly. It's not shaykh. It's not even to say a constant in the universe. It's not that Hashem created the universe with a constant that he will always be around. It's just that this is everything. Hashem is everything, every something and every nothing. As a matter of fact, when we say something from nothing, the nothing that we're referring to is Hashem. So you might say, why are we referring to Hashem as nothing? Hashem is the constant in the universe, etc., etc. So ultimately what it comes down to is that from Hashem's point of view, there will always be something. Everything in the world is Him, and He appreciates that in the deepest way, and there's no getting around that. The way that you can get around that is when you switch the perspective. From our perspective, we are very solidly existing, and we don't really perceive Hashem's existence on a day-to-day basis. At least I personally don't. Happen to not be Moshe Rabbeinu. But that is, in general, how the concept of the nothing in something from nothing works. The nothing is actually Hashem. It's just that we can't perceive Him directly, so we perceive it to be nothing. So Hashem usually uses cause and effect to go from level to level to filter down His light into something that we can appreciate. But ultimately, there is an inflection point in which Hashem does create. That is to say, as we defined before, creating is making something from nothing, where he says, okay, that's it, the perspective is ending, and now everything below this point is not going to be able to perceive me properly, or at all, and it's only going to be able to perceive its own existence. So those are the two kinds of creation, and that is where we're holding in chapter 20, and Emiras Hashem, we're going to be discussing, I believe that in this coming week, we're going to be discussing the rest of chapter 20 for the week's Tanya. It's deep stuff. Hopefully I'm going to be able to summarize it in a constructive way that we'll be able to walk away with concrete ideas from it, instead of a lot of Kabbalistic ideas, which are all brilliant on their own, but just to have something concrete coming out of it. And yeah, Emiras Hashem, hopefully it'll be a good challenge, and Emiras Hashem, looking forward.